Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Influencers Project. I'm your host, Craig Reynolds. With me today is a man whose talents are so great, he is considered one of the greatest photographers the BMX world has ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John Ker. John, how are you today?
Hey, I'm very well. Thanks, Craig. It's fun to be here.
You know, what's fun is that you're usually on the other end of this whole deal. You're the usually one that's doing the questions and taking the photos. Now we get to turn everything around and find out about your background, how you came to be, and the influencers that helped you get to where you are today, which is fascinating because, you know, I know some of your story, but not all of it. But what I do know is incredible. And I know you've assisted a lot of people in their careers as well, as far as being a mentor and helping people out with the likes of Scott Town and Mike Caruth. And I know you've worked with Mark Losi in the past as well. So you've touched a lot of incredible individuals, and you got a great story, man. So let's get started. I know you grew up on the East Coast. Where'd you grow up, and how did you find the BMX bike?
Well, I grew up in Seagirt and Beach Haven, New Jersey. I grew up on the coast, and I didn't see a BMX bike until I was working at a motocross track in New Jersey. A friend of mine from high school started the first motocross track in New Jersey. And I was doing surf photography for Surfer Magazine at the time. I was trying to get a job as a full-time staff member at Surfer Magazine eventually. I was freelancing for them, writing articles and stuff, and I was getting stuff published. I had shot some skateboarding too. And anyway, I was getting stuff published, and my friend asked me if I'd like to come out and shoot motocross photos at his track one day and maybe do the track photography out there. And I'd never seen a motocross race before, but I met with him, went out and checked out the track. It looked cool. I checked out some of their publications they'd done. I guess their previous photographer had left, so they were looking to replace him. So I agreed to do it. It paid $30 for one day, $30 for a Sunday. I'd go in, I'd shoot photos all day long. I'd go in the darkroom, develop the film, and then I would print the photos, and I'd leave at like midnight or thereabouts. So I'd be there for like 15 hours or something like that, or pretty close to it, for $30, you know. And that was my first paid photography job, and I did it for 2 summers. And I think I asked for a raise. I think I asked for $35 a week for the next year. And they're, no, we can't afford that. You know, forget it. So I just did it for like 2 summers. And then I had a regular job. I was working, you know, the rest of the week normally I was doing real estate appraisals back then. I had actually gone to college and I got a degree in economics, but you can't actually get a job as an economist with a bachelor's degree. And I never went to grad school. And I had gotten a job, my brother had gotten a job at this real estate appraisal firm where you measured houses and inspected them, filled out the forms and stuff. And every once in a while, we'd go to somebody famous's house. I went to Bruce Springsteen's house one time, which was interesting. He was home and he showed me and my coworker the house. And we didn't let on we knew it was him until the very end. You know, we just acted like he was just an ordinary guy. And then when we were leaving, we said, by the way, you're going to be doing any concerts in this area anytime soon? And he got like this big smile on his face and he started talking with us, and turned out he was a surfer too. I had heard that.
Oh, wow.
I had heard that he was a surfer, and I'd heard some stories about him, and it was funny. We talked to him for probably 10, 15 minutes. He was really nice. And then when we were leaving, he actually got his surfboard out of his front closet, stuck it in the back seat of he stuck it behind the front seat of his Chevy Corvette. I think it was a 1962. I used to know the year models I used to know the Corvettes by year model because I was kind of into Corvettes. Not that I ever owned one or anything, but cool. And he stuck his surfboard behind his front seat of his Corvette and drove off to the beach to go surfing while we measured the house and stuff. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, as far as how I got into, you know, it was this long story how I got into BMX.
Well, hold on. First of all, how did you get into photography first? Like that's a big piece of who you are. I mean, I remember sitting on the starting gate going, all right, where are the photographers positioned on the track? Because I knew I was going to win this lap. So where are they positioned so I can be in the right spot? So if you're on the outside of turn one, I need to go a little wide so you can get a good shot of me.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, that's what I was thinking about on the gate. I want to be in the magazines as much as I want to win the race, and I knew I was going to win the race. So next step, let's get in the magazine too. So what is it about photography that intrigued you to become a photographer back in the day?
Well, I always liked pictures. I liked artwork. I liked photographs and stuff like that. And when I took up surfing when I was, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, I forget how old I was. My friend's father bought a surfboard, and he let us, learn how to surf on it. It was like me and my friends, we were all like 10, 11, 12 years old, whatever it was. And we started learning how to surf. And then I just loved surfing. So I got into it. My brother used to loan me his board. My brother was working before I was, and my older brother, Bruce, and he'd loan me a surfboard. He said I could borrow a surfboard and go surfing during the day. So I would go surfing every day as much as I could. And I loved reading the surf magazines. I loved the pictures in the surf magazines. And I wanted to shoot some. I wanted to take pictures. And so I asked my father one day if I could borrow his camera to shoot surf photos, because we had this one day where the surf was just spectacular. I think most people don't realize that New Jersey actually gets good surf sometimes.
I was going to say that to you. I never think of surfing as an East Coast kind of a deal. But I've heard there's great waves out there, but it's always California, Hawaii, all these other tropical places where they've got these massive waves. Right. But I never think of New Jersey, epic, right, spot for surfing.
Like once a week or so, maybe once, twice a week. It would vary. And it wouldn't be as spectacular as Hawaii, but it would be, it'd be comparable to California on a good day. And it would be, we had offshore winds most of the time. So if we had a storm, we'd get good waves. And if it was a big storm, they'd be good sized waves, maybe 10 feet, whatever, maybe bigger. And we had one day in the winter of 1968 where the waves were good. I was 17 years old, and the waves were spectacular. And there was some guy on the beach taking pictures with a camera. And I said, man, I wish I could take pictures. Waves are so good. And I went home later that day. I think it was a Sunday, Saturday or Sunday. I think it was whatever it was. I think it was a Saturday in early February, 1968. And I asked my father if he could show me how to use his camera, if I could borrow his camera. And so he showed me how to use it. And I rode my bike or drove the car or whatever, probably rode my bike, or I don't remember. Went up to the beach to take pictures. Couldn't remember how to use the camera. There's something I wasn't doing right. Had to go back to the house and have my father show me again. Then went back up to the beach again to shoot photos. And the surf wasn't that good. It was the day after the great surf. So I guess it was the following day. And waves weren't as good. It was okay, but not great. I shot some photos, and then I went back home. And then the next day, the surf was still pretty good from the same swell, but instead of being 8 to 10 feet high, which it was the first day I saw the guy shooting photos, this day it was 3 feet high, maybe a little bigger, with offshore winds, really clean, good guys surfing. I shot surf photos. I got some pretty good ones, and I mailed them off to Surfer Magazine. And they sent me a letter back, rejection letter back, along with the slides. And I thought, well, I have to try again. And so I kept trying. It took 4.5 years before I finally sold him some of my photos. And I would, at the time, I was just using my father's rangefinder camera, and I would wade out into the water with the camera because it only had a 50 millimeter lens on it or whatever. And so I'd try to get as close to the riders, as surfers as I could. And I'd wade out in the water, and I'd hold the camera over my head when the waves were hitting me so it wouldn't get wet, And then I'd bring it back down and I'd shoot photos when my friends were surfing. And, I later went on a trip to the Virgin Islands in 1970 with one of my friends, and to go surfing when I was in college, one Christmas vacation. And I think the tickets were pretty cheap. It was $100 to fly to the Virgin Islands back then, or something like that. We flew to the Virgin Islands with our surfboards, and we went surfing for a week. And I bought a waterproof camera while I was there. I bought a waterproof Nikonos. It cost $135. I remember these prices because back then that was a lot of money, And
Right.
I bought the camera in the Virgin Islands and I started shooting water photos in the Virgin Islands and came back to New Jersey and I'd swim out with the camera, or else I'd wear it around my neck and surf with it. And in between my own waves, I'd take pictures of my friends riding waves. And then I'd also, sometimes I'd swim out with the camera with a pair of flippers or whatever, fins, swim fins, and I'd shoot photos. And eventually I got enough good photos that I thought, well, Surfer Magazine is probably going to want to buy these, but I think I might have to write an article to go with it because they keep sending me back my photos. So I sat down and I started writing an article, and I'd read it and I'd go, this is boring, forget this, I'm gonna try again. And I kept trying to write an article that was interesting. And I finally wrote something I liked, and it was only one paragraph long. It was 4 sentences, a total of 44 words. And I thought, well, I like this, but every time I add more to it, it gets worse, it gets boring. So I'll just send this into Surfer Magazine with my best photos of the last couple of months. And I sent it in and they sent me a letter back saying, yeah, basically, we love it. We're going to use it in the magazine.
Amazing.
So that was how I first got published. And then I liked doing it. I love surf photos. And so I was doing it, trying to, eke out, a partial living as a freelance photographer. And then my friend asked me to come out and shoot motocross photos at his track, one summer. It was a few years later.
Yeah.
And so I went out there and I started shooting motocross photos, and it was challenging, because it was different than surfing, but it was fun. And I found, the angles I liked, the kind of action I liked. I was shooting with black and white film, mostly at the motocross track, because that's where they printed the newspaper in. I shot, some color photos there just to have some, but while I was out there shooting motocross photos, somebody brought in, some motocross magazines that we could look at. And I saw pictures of BMX in the motocross magazines. And as I recall, I think they were shot by Bob and Wendy Osborne. And they were cool. BMX photos were cool. But I was more into shooting, motocross at the time. And then I moved out to California a couple of years later, trying to get a job at Surfer Magazine doing freelance photography and stuff. And the publisher of BMX Plus was out surfing one day at Malibu when I was shooting photos there. Co-publisher is Mike Aguirre. His partner Jim Stevens had started the magazine. Jim Stevens used to work for Bob Osborne at BMXA, and Jim had an interesting story about that. He said Oz came into the office one day and told Jim that he was going to give himself a raise because the magazine was doing well. And Jim said something like, "Oh, that's great. I could use more money too." And I said, "Well, I wasn't going to give you a raise. I was just going to give myself a raise." I never confirmed this with anybody else, but this is my recollection. And Jim said, "Well, forget that. I'll start my own magazine." And that's why he started BMX Plus, was because Oz didn't want to give him a raise when Oz was giving himself a raise. Wow. But I can imagine Oz must have been working crazy hours, because he was a full-time fireman. Which is what Jim Stevens was. They were both full-time firemen, and they had met each other in a fireman's competition, some kind of athletic competition. And Jim Stevens was such a hard competitor that Oz wanted to hire him. He thought this guy'd be good to have on my team selling ads. And so that's how they started. Jim was selling ads, and that's how Jim started BMX Plus. And so anyway, I met Mike Aguirre on the beach at Malibu, and I went in to interview with him at the magazine to see if they could hire me as the darkroom guy. They needed a darkroom person, and at the time I was trying to do freelance photography for Surfer Magazine. I was shooting surf photos. I was even starting to shoot some ads. I was shooting fashion ads for him. Now, I didn't know anything about fashion photography, but the publisher thought I had a good eye, and so he lined me up with some of the surf clothing companies, and I went in, I showed them my portfolio, and they liked it. So I started shooting surf clothing stuff on the side. It didn't pay much money, but it's a little bit of money. And so I was making some money doing that. And then I went in for this audition at BMX Plus, and I or the interview, I guess, and I showed them my motocross photos, which were similar enough to BMX. I mean,
Right.
as you know, it's like I had experience shooting motocross, so they hired me to do the darkroom work, and I don't think I was that great a darkroom guy, but I could develop film and print pictures, and so I started working the darkroom, and then while I was working in the darkroom, I volunteered to start proofreading the magazine one day because there were so many typos and misspellings and and punctuation errors in the magazine. I thought, somebody needs to proofread this thing. So I offered to start proofreading some of the copy, and so they let me start doing that because it cleaned up the copy. And then we had Bob Hadley was working as the editor there. We had there were some transitions as far as who were the editors and stuff. Charlie Litsky was the editor at one time. I think Scott Breithaupt was the editor.
Lord.
In the early years of some of the first issues. But Bob Hadley was the editor most of the time I was there. And then one day, Bob Hadley came in and said he wanted to leave and start a bottom bracket. I think it was a bottom bracket company with his brother or cousin or somebody like that. And so he wanted to do that. So Jim Stevens, who was the owner of BMX Plus, said, John, I want to make you the editor. And I'm like, I don't want to be the editor. I'm not like a BMX racer. I don't have a history of racing BMX. I was photographing it. I started photographing it after I started working in the darkroom. I used to go out with Mike Aguirre, who was the guy I'd met on the beach at Malibu. And I started going to the BMX races with him and shooting some of the bike tests with him. And his photos were better than mine. In the beginning, I don't know if they were always better than mine, but I'd go out and I'd shoot with him, and I'd get some photos, and sometimes I'd get some decent ones, and they started using my stuff. And then there was one race I went to where Mike couldn't go to the race, and so I had to go to the race because it was a big race, and there was some reason he couldn't go, so I had to go to it, and I had to write a story about it. And so I was like, oh man, it's like now I've got to write an article of it to go over the photos I'm shooting at this race. So I was interviewing people after the race, and I talked to Dave Marietti. And Dave Marietti, he'd won the 15 expert class at the time. He was a really good racer. And
no kidding.
I went to ask him some questions about the race, and he had just a great photographic memory of everything that happened in his race. And I thought, and I was writing notes, taking notes on a notepad and stuff. And I asked him about some of the other races, and he remembered every single thing that happened, every move that happened on the track in these other races too, 16 expert, 17 expert, pro class, whatever. I don't think they had 18 and over. I don't think they had 18 and over expert. I think it was just 17 and over expert at the time.
Right.
They added 18 and over expert later when there got to be too many 18-year-olds.
Right.
Anyway, so Dave Marietti gave me all this information on the race, and I wrote up a story. And they liked the article well enough, they decided to start sending me the articles, sending me to the races instead of Mike Aguirre. So, I'm writing articles, and then, Jim wanted to make me the editor. And I didn't want to be the editor because I was like, well, that's too hard. I'm not qualified, So I said, well, let's hire Dean Bradley, because Dean Bradley was working at Action Now magazine then. He was a freelancer for Action Now. He had worked with Jim Stevens previously, but I think they butted heads too much, and so Jim didn't want to hire Dean to be the editor because he figured they'd clash too much, and so he wanted me to be the editor, but I talked Jim into hiring Dean Bradley as the managing editor. So they paid him enough money to bring him aboard as the managing editor because we needed somebody who could test the bikes. I couldn't. I was riding BMX bikes for fun. Once I started working at BMX Plus, I started riding the BMX bikes for fun, just around the parking lot and occasionally at the tracks. But I wasn't any good.
Right.
I couldn't do the double jumps or anything like that. I was like a poor to mediocre bike rider. So we needed somebody good. So so Dean was doing the managing editing, and then I was the editor because I could spell and edit the copy and pick the photos and turn in the photos. And we hired, I guess we hired Bob Hadley's mother to do the darkroom work for the magazine. I forget when we started doing that. Bob Hadley's mother started doing the darkroom work for the magazine because she was a serious amateur photographer, and she loved doing photos, and she was good at it. And then Dean had a girl that he knew. I suspect it might have been one of his girlfriends. I don't know, but it was a girl who worked it was a girl who was a photographer at the LA Times. Now, the LA Times was like the New York Times. That was like the top newspaper in California, as far as I knew. And she did, I think it was like freelance work for the LA Times. She was a good photographer, but she didn't have full-time work at the LA Times. So she was willing to come in and do the darkroom work at BMX Plus when I was having to do the editing, writing, shooting photos, doing all this stuff. And so, I was relieved from the darkroom duties first by Joe Hadley, Bob's mother, and then by Deborah, I think it was Deborah Robinson. I can't think of her full name right now offhand.
Wow.
But anyway, she was a very good photographer. And she taught me some tricks. Like she taught me this trick where if you want to shoot photos of people indoors, you was to take the flash of the camera and she used a newspaper that she wrapped around the flash with a rubber band so that most of the flash would go up and hit the ceiling and light up the room like a big softbox, but there'd be enough light bouncing off of the newspaper going straight forward to light the shadows on the face. And it gave really good lighting. It was great quality lighting. So I started using that trick whenever I was shooting indoors, with a reasonably low ceiling. You couldn't do it like at the ABA Grands where the ceiling's like 90 feet high or whatever it is, Yeah. You could only do it in a regular room, but it gave really nice lighting. And, that was the trick they used at the LA Times. So, so I'd do stuff like that. And it was fun. I was always learning new stuff photography wise. I used to, read books on photography. I'd go to art galleries on very rare occasions and photographic galleries and study the work of my favorite photographers. I remember Neil Leifer was my favorite sports photographer back then. He used to shoot for Sports Illustrated. He was the top photographer at Sports Illustrated. He started shooting for them when he was like 14 years old or something like that. He was a really good photographer. He sent him some samples of his work and he was so good. I think they started flying him around to shoot like football and baseball games when he was like 15 years old or something like that. He was super talented. And, when I was working at BMX Plus, it reminds me that Tony Donaldson had sent in some pictures to BMX Plus and they were really good. And he was in college. I think he was in college at the time. And I had like gone to college because I was just figured that's what I had to do. But I really wanted to be a photographer. The whole time I went to college, I was studying surf photos in the surf magazines at night in my spare time, trying to figure out how to be a good surf photographer. And I was figuring out what made a good surf photo. And I kind of did the same thing with motocross photos and BMX photos. I'd see photos I liked and I'd see photos I didn't like as much. And I'd figure out what's the difference here, and I'd do the same thing with my own photos. I'd shoot photos and I'd get some that were good and some that weren't good. And I go, what's the difference here? Why is this photo so much better than this one? And I got down to analyzing like the tiny little details in the photo as far as, sometimes it would just be the background or the lighting. And other times it'd be the body position. Like one of the things I noticed about BMX photos and mountain bike photos was that it helped if the guy's arms and legs were bent at the same angle.
Really?
Yeah, it seemed to make a big difference. It made the picture more pleasing if both the elbows and the knees were bent at like 50 degrees or 90 degrees or whatever it was. It seemed like that helped. And, the pedal position, where the foot on the pedal looked the best, and one of the things I noticed in motocross and BMX photos was that the pictures usually look best if one wheel was higher than the other. If both wheels were at the same level, it didn't look as exciting. So if the front wheel was higher than the back wheel, that was more exciting, more dynamic. Or if the front wheel was lower than the back wheel, that was more exciting. Now, there were exceptions. You would occasionally get great shots, like Bob Osborne used to get great photos. I used to really like his work. Like he had pictures of, I think, Mike Buff or RL jumping over, jumping over some sports car. And I think their wheels were pretty level at the time, but it was a killer shot. It had a cool looking sports car. They're jumping over it, looking totally stylish, big air, and probably destroying their rims when they land, but it could make for killer photos. And I'd go out trying to shoot great berm shots, like Jeff Botima had, a classic berm shot that I think Oz shot in BMX Action. And I could never get great berm shots. I mean, I'd go out and I'd try to get great berm shots, but it was hard to do. We had to push all the dirt into the berm so it'd have enough dry powder dirt to make it fly when they hit it. Right. And they'd do one try on it, and then you have to put more dirt back in there to do it again. And I never got any berm shots to rival Oz's, but
he was really good. I mean, him, you, Wendy, Gork, like there's so many good photographers that I would study the photos like you say, and look at the smallest of details, like people's tires, like all the dirt kicking off of their back tire because they're pedaling so fast and they're just digging the dirt up. Someone power wheeling out of a corner, like Mikey King power wheeling in out of a turn, like just the detail that goes into it, and the fact that you guys can capture that is magic. It's so amazing. I love it.
It was fun. Like back in those days, we didn't have autofocus, and it was too hard to track focus manually when the guys were coming at you. I didn't, I may have tried it sometimes, but I generally found it was safer to pre-focus on the place where the best action was going to happen. So like I'd focus on the first jump, and I'd learned in something in photography, I learned that the depth of field, which is how much of the photo is in focus, it changes with what's called the aperture or the f-stop of the camera. And if you shoot with the camera wide open, you get very little depth of field. That's when the lens has got the maximum aperture where it's open as much as possible. Where if the aperture on the lens is smaller, then you get more depth of field. You get, more of the people coming over the jump will be in focus. And I learned that you have about twice as much in focus behind the point of focus as you do in front of the point of focus. So if you focus at like 12 feet away, it might be sharp from 10 feet away to 12 feet, and also from 12 feet away to 16 feet away, or something like that. Or
sure.
Yeah. You get like 4 feet on the other side of 12 feet, and you only get 2 feet in focus on the close side of 12 feet. So I'd focus like 1/3 of the way across the jump. So I'd get the maximum number of guys in focus coming over the jump.
Wow.
And there I'd shoot races like Knoxville, Tennessee, or Nashville, Knoxville, whatever. There'd be a big double jump in the first straightaway.
Nashville.
Okay, and I'd want to get guys in focus in midair at the highest altitude, which would be about halfway through the jump. And sometimes I couldn't see that point on the ground from where I was standing. So I'd go up and I'd pace off the distance between the first and second jump. And it would be, say it was 6 paces or whatever it was. And then I would go back and I'd focus on the landing in the second jump. And then I would walk forward 3 paces. So I'd be in focus for the halfway point between them.
So you're focusing with your feet and not just the lens.
Right. Yeah. Because I couldn't, the landing jump would be blocking the point of ground I wanted to focus on to get him in the maximum altitude. So I was using my math skills from high school and stuff to try to, maximize the number of sharp photos I was getting. And I remember there was crazy stuff. I remember reading in my camera manual for like my Nikon F2 camera, which is what I used to use when I started shooting photos. I remember reading in that camera manual one time that, the flash sync team was flash sync speed was like a 60th or a 90th of a second or something like that. But it said if you were shooting with flash bulbs, you could shoot at up to 1,000th of a second or even a 2,000th of a second if you use disposable flash bulbs. So
What?
yeah,
Really?
yeah. So
Oh my gosh.
I happened to be in the camera store one time looking at stuff, and I saw they had a flash that used the old manual flash bulbs, and I was like, cool. It was $5 because nobody used those anymore. Everybody had electronic flashes, but I bought one of those old flash bulb shooters, and I started buying flash bulbs at Walmart, or not Walmart. It was what was the other store back then? It was similar to Walmart, but it wasn't Walmart.
Sears, JCPenney, Kmart, all kinds of stuff.
Kmart. It was Kmart. Yeah, I think it was Kmart. So I'd start buying flash bulbs at Kmart so I could shoot with flash and fill in the shadows on the guys when they were jumping. And I could, because I didn't like having these really dark shadows on the guys' faces when they were jumping. And so I started buying I'd buy $10 worth of flash bulbs when I, went to Kmart or whatever, or $5, whatever. And when I set up to do a cover shot, I would, put the flash thing in there and put the flash bulbs in there, and I'd shoot photos with the flash bulbs so I wouldn't get those dark shadows on the faces. And I started doing that back in like 1980 or 81. I forget when exactly, a long time ago. And then it was a real treat for me about maybe it's 10 or 20 years ago. I forget when, but Canon. I switched to Canon autofocus gear after my Nikon stuff got stolen out of my car one time.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I was taking a photo class at night after work. I was, this is like about 30 years ago. I was taking some photo classes at night, and during my photo class, somebody broke into my car and stole all my Nikon gear. And I also had the company Hasselblad. We had a company Hasselblad that let us shoot at a 500th of a second with flash, because it had what was called a leaf shutter, and that was in my car too. And anyway, so I came back out to my car. My car had been broken into, windows smashed, and almost all the camera gear I owned was stolen. And I had to go into work and tell them that the company Hasselblad was stolen out of my car. And what was lucky was the company's insurance policy covered my gear too. So I think I got like $5,000 or something for all my gear. I had a lot of Nikon gear. I had multiple camera bodies. I had a 300 f2.8 lens. I had a lot of stuff. And so I bought Canon.
Was that 300, the 300 your surfing lens?
Yeah, it was one of my surfing lenses. I also liked it. I shot it with BMX sometimes, but it was hard to use at the BMX courses because I actually bought it for BMX because I had a 650 millimeter lens for surfing I used most of the time.
Wow.
Yeah, I bought that in 1974. It cost me, I think it was $459 or something like that, and it was a manual.
What is it, like $8,000 now to buy a 600 millimeter lens?
Yeah, it's around that now. Uh-huh. Yeah, they're expensive. I mean, I don't own one anymore. I've still got that old manual focus one. I shot some photos of the moon with it a few years ago, and they turned out really well. I'll have to send you one.
Wow. Yeah, please. I would love that. If you can find it, we can put it in the show. We can show it.
Okay. All right. Awesome. I'll find it. I'll find one later and I'll send it to you. You might have to remind me, but I'll find one.
I'll remind you. Don't worry. So before we get into why you switched over to Canon, we're going to get kicked out of Zoom in 3 minutes. Why don't we cut right here? Let's get out. Let's log back in, and then we'll pick it back up right there. Okay.
Okay, that's cool.
All right, we are back because I'm still too cheap to start paying for Zoom, but I'm probably going to have to. So, John, your car got broken into, and you lost all the Nikon gear. We talked about the long lenses, but now you switched over to Canon. Why and how big of a change was that for you? Because I've tried to shoot a Nikon before. I can't. It's not intuitive. My brain doesn't work like that. But I can pick up a Canon and know all of how the whole thing works. It's weird.
Well, years ago, when I first got into photography, I went up to New York City to buy a camera. I was going to buy a Minolta camera, and I I was talking to the salesman, and he said, "You're really, you're really serious about this. You should buy a Nikon camera. If you're serious about photography, you should get a Nikon camera." So I bought a Nikon camera, and
Wait,
that's what I had for.
was this a B&H photo?
I don't think it was B&H at the time. I think it was a different
Wow.
camera store, but I forget which
Okay.
one. But
All right.
anyway, so I bought a Nikon camera. That was like 1972, maybe 72, 73, maybe. I think it was
Wow.
1970. I think it was 1973. I bought my first Nikon camera. Not positive what year it was. And then, so here it was 1992. I think it was 92 when my gear got stolen. And at that time, autofocus was big. And I was shooting, I think I was shooting the Supercross races and stuff at the time. And all the other photographers had switched over to Canon, because all the top photographers used to use Nikon. And then Canon's autofocus gear got better than Nikon's. And so everybody switched to Canon, and they told me, get the Canon stuff, it's better. And since I needed to get new gear, I just bought Canon. I trusted him. I bought Canon. And, and so then for the last 30 years or so, I've been using the Canon stuff. There was a while where a lot of the photographers switched back to Nikon because the Nikons got better in autofocus than the Canon for a while. But I wasn't ready to, get rid of all my gear and buy new gear at the time.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking. Undertaking, switching cameras, for sure.
Yeah. So I stayed with Canon. Then Canon's autofocus got better and came pretty close to catching up to Nikon. I think they're probably close to equal now. I don't even know. But I've got, Canon gear now. But it was basically recommendations of other people as far as what to get.
Right.
It was Nikon back in the 70s, and then in the 90s it was Canon. And now I don't know what to get. I hear Sony's really good. I hear some of my friends are switching to Sony now, but right. I don't know what the best is right now.
You know what? Someone once told me that the best camera is the one you've got in your hand. Like, make it work for you, use it, and shoot it. I know a lot of people like Sony. I know a lot of people that have Canon are now switching over to Canon mirrorless because it's so fast. I met a guy that was shooting in this event I was at, and he's like, it's almost like cheating because you just pick it up and it automatically focuses on the eyes. And I'm like, what? He's like, oh, watch this. And he goes, boop, took a shot, and it was amazing. Like, it's like a robot. You almost don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I haven't bought a mirrorless camera yet, but I have heard similar things, and I expect I'll buy one sooner or later. But right now I'm holding off on it.
Well, I'm holding on because I think the prices of the lenses that we have for the SLRs are going to come down, so I can just buy some more lenses.
Yeah. The good thing is, I guess, with the Canon gear, you can mount the old autofocus lenses onto the new mirrorless cameras with like an adapter ring or something like that.
Yeah, so I heard that too.
You don't have to buy all new lenses, which is good. That's a plus.
Which would be fantastic, exactly. So what I've heard so far is one of your biggest influences was surfing. You love surfing. You wanted to photograph surfing, and that parlayed into motocross and BMX and some more fashion work as well. Is there anything that you haven't shot that you really wish you would or have or would like to shoot?
That's a good question. I mean, I like wildlife photos. I think it would be neat to go to Africa and shoot wildlife. Go to a safari park or something like that and shoot the animals. I've shot photos. I shot photos in the San Diego Zoo one time, and it was cool. I like taking pictures of animals, but I don't get to do it very often. So that might be something I'd like to shoot at some point. Other than that, I'm not sure what else I would like to shoot that I haven't shot. I really like shooting freestyle motocross. I used to shoot Travis Pastrana when he was doing freestyle motocross, and I like shooting freestyle motocross. That was fun to shoot. I like BMX BMX freestyle too, but I thought the freestyle motocross was even more exciting when they're, doing it on the motorcycles, 30 feet off the ground and stuff.
I was going to say they're much higher, right?
Yeah. But it was like all those things. It's like, it's like I figure out what can I do to get a good picture here in this situation. I'm trying to photograph somebody doing something that looks cool. and I've got to get a background that's not terrible, in relation to the subject. Often it's just the cleanest background you can get, out of focus, far away, non-conflicting. Like if you're shooting a light-colored subject, shoot it against a dark background. If you're shooting a subject that's darker colored, shoot it against a lighter background. I had a class in photography lighting one time I took years ago. And the guy who taught the class said, light against dark, dark against light. Always telling us if you're going to photograph a dark subject, photograph it against a light background and vice versa. So there was stuff like that, and look for contrasting colors if you're shooting color. All sorts of stuff like that comes into play. So I shot like ballet dancing one time. That was kind of interesting. I had people who wanted me to shoot dancing for some reason or other. So, okay, I'll try it, and it was cool. It was interesting to do that because basically I'm just trying to get good photos no matter what it is. I think it'd be fun to shoot like football and baseball too. I haven't set out to do it because, I'm not like a huge football fan. I'm not a huge baseball fan. I like playing the sports myself, up to a point. I wasn't very good at them. So, if my friends were really good, it was less fun for me. But if everybody was pretty bad at it, about my level, then it was fun,
You get a level playing field.
Right. Yeah. Level playing field. It's like I wasn't very good at most sports. I was pretty bad at most sports. I wasn't very good. I wasn't really that good a surfer. That was one. I mean, I was shocked one time. This girl I was going out with one time told me that there was one day I'd been surfing. We had a really good hurricane swell in New Jersey. And she told me that, one of the guys came into work and said that, oh, it was great. The surf was good. And he mentioned there were all these guys out, and he mentioned my name as one of the guys who was like one of the best surfers out. And I'm like, no, he's got to be mistaken, because I'm not one of the best guys, and she's like, no, he was insistent. You were one of the best guys. I'm like, no, I'm not one of the best guys. It must have been somebody else. And later on it dawned on me, maybe I'm better than I think I am, Always comparing myself to like the best guys in town or whatever. And so it's possible I might have been better than average, but I never thought I was good enough that anybody would be impressed with my surfing, I wasn't that good, but it was interesting to hear that, somebody thought I was good,
Right. Well, what do they say? You never compare yourself to someone else, just compare yourself to where you were and just continue to grow and progress, right?
That's probably a good tip. Yeah.
Yeah. After all the tips that you've given about about photography right now. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real fast. When we would go to races and we would go to the same tracks year after year after year, did you ever find yourself struggling to find a different photo? Like if you went back to Nashville, I shot the doubles. I shot the doubles the last 3 years. What angle can I get to shoot those? Or was it, I'm not going to shoot those at all. I'm going to focus on the first jump or the turning double? Or was there another angle that you would try to approach every time? Or was it, relative and you just, depending on where they're going to be on the track or what the track was, working as that weekend, did you go shoot that?
Well, with most of the tracks that I went to over and over again, like Nashville or whatever, I would find the angles where I typically got the best shots. And I would make sure I shot those angles again, but I would also try to shoot other angles, and I would try to shoot other things, and I'd sometimes, occasionally I shoot pan shots, where you shoot like a 30th, a 60th, or 1/125th of a second or whatever. I'd shoot from the outside of the course, from the outside of the first straight, from the inside, just looking for different things, use a different focal length lens, instead of shooting with the 135, maybe I'd shoot with the 200 or the 50 or whatever. And I'd try to, mix things up to some degree, but I'd also try to shoot the reliable stuff. I had to make sure I came back with, some good stuff. So I'd do some experimental stuff and some reliable stuff. And that was, that was one of the things I found was I had to come back with good photos. if I didn't have good photos, we were in trouble. So I had to,
Right.
I had to shoot it. The most important photos I had to shoot at the most reliable, the most reliable shots. The guys coming over the first jump together, the guys coming out of the first corner together, or going through the first corner together. And then the other stuff would just be, well, let's see what I can get here or there, or whatever. Tight single shots of guys coming over the jumps, or the group shots of the guys together, and it would vary. But I'd try to get a mix of like new stuff and old stuff, just to just try to mix things up.
So let me ask you this. You've done a lot of tests. You are now working for Mountain Bike Action magazine. What do you find the difference is between working with mountain bike riders or the test guys that are testing the bikes versus BMX guys or BMX test riders back in the day?
Well, the BMX test riders, the main thing we looked for was good jumping ability, because to get a BMX shot, unless you're really good at shooting pan shots or berm shots, the signature BMX move was the guy jumping the bike with style.
Mm-hmm.
I'd look for guys with good style. And when I started shooting mountain bike stuff, I would try to shoot with usually with either guys with a motocross background or a BMX background, because they had the best jumping style.
Mm-hmm.
The other stuff usually followed. If a guy could jump well, he could usually do everything else also.
Right.
I discovered that years ago with like shooting with guys like Stu Thompson and Harry Leary and Greg Hill, Tim Judge. You were a really good jumper yourself. I shouldn't probably bring you into this, but
Well, thank you.
But you had great style. I used to like photographing you. But there were a lot of guys who had good style. I like shooting the Patterson brothers, Brent and Brian Patterson. A lot of guys with great style, and it was always fun to shoot them. And shooting mountain bikes is kind of similar. You look for guys with good style, guys who look good on a bike, and it's usually the more somebody does it, the better they look. And my theory was that once guys got good at everything else, they'd try to get good at jumping too, because jumping was always one of those things that would distinguish people. And so if somebody was a good jumper, they had already mastered everything else, and they were trying to, learn how to jump well. And if they got good at jumping, by then they were good at everything. So that was one of my rules, was to find somebody who was a good jumper and photograph them.
That's awesome. Of all the guys that you photographed in the past, who has been your favorite, and what has been your favorite photo that's ever been published that you've shot?
I honestly don't know if I could say what's my favorite photo that's ever been published, and I'd have a hard time picking a favorite guy too. As far as my favorite BMX rider to photograph, I don't think I could say who my favorite was. I used to love shooting Stu Thompson. He was my favorite in the early days. Tim Judge for his jumping style.
So good.
I really liked photographing him when I could. Billy Griggs was a really good jumper. He was our test rider for a while. And he wasn't as famous as all the other guys, but he was a really good stylish jumper.
He was so stylish and such a good racer too. Like he had a really total package that he brought with him. He was fantastic.
Yeah. Pete Lonkarovich was great. Andy Patterson. I like shooting Andy Patterson. I don't know if you remember Andy Patterson.
Yeah, I still remember them all, man. Are you kidding me? That's my era. I'm in it. Yes.
Yeah, but there were so many guys who were really good, and like Sherry Elliott. I used to love photographing Sherry Elliott.
Sherry was so far ahead of her time. She was so far ahead of her time, and I've told this story before. She destroyed me at an indoor race in Detroit, Michigan. We got on the gate for an open class, and she blew us away. And I didn't even feel bad because I know how great she was, and ended up being on a mountain bike in her entire pedaling career. She was amazing. Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, like the first time I ever saw her race, there was some race, I think it was in the Midwest or something. And she was racing the 10-11 open class. I guess she was I guess she was probably 11 expert girl or something, whatever they called it, whatever the girls' class was.
Yeah.
And she raced against the best guys in the country, who were the best guys in the world at that time. And I think she won the 10-11 open class.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. She was
And
probably 10 beating everybody.
she was phenomenal. And she was a stylish jumper. She was a super stylish jumper. She was incredible. She was absolutely amazing. If I had to pick one person who stood out more than anybody else in BMX in my memory, it would probably be Sherry Elliott, just because of how great she was. She wasn't just better than all the other girls. She was better than all the other guys her age too.
Totally.
I mean,
without a doubt.
That was amazing. That was incredible. But
I'd love to get her on here. This would be fantastic to talk to her about her career. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, she was amazing. But there were so many great riders. Freestyle. Yeah, I love shooting Eddie Fiola and Mike Dominguez, Brian Blyther.
At the pool, where what was the name of the skate park? What was that place? I forget. Why am I drawing a blank?
Pipeline Skate Park.
Pipeline.
Yeah.
Genius.
Oh,
yeah.
It was great shooting those guys there.
Oh my God.
I don't know. Do you know who Bill Batchelor is? Do you know Bill Batchelor?
The name sounds familiar, but I can't picture him.
He was like a 14-year-old kid who took up BMX freestyle photography back in, I guess it was back in the early 70s or something like that. I'm trying to remember when it was. No, early 80s, I guess. And he was really good photographer. But he shot great stuff. He shares it on Facebook or something like that now. I'll see his photos sometimes, but he used to shoot great photos, and he ended up getting a regular job, and he just got back into his photography recently and started sharing the photos from his archives from 30, 40 years ago and stuff.
Wow.
Now he was a really good photographer. The ones you mentioned, like Oz and Wendy and Spike. Steve Guyverson was really good.
Guyverson was a great too. Yeah. Did you find yourself competing against them? Like, okay, I got to shoot a better photo than these guys for this issue. Was there ever a competition between all of you?
I never really thought of it that way. I would just try to shoot the best photos I could.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I looked up to those guys. I thought, like Oz and Wendy, I thought they were the best BMX photographers in the world.
Really good.
I still think they were at that time. Guyverson was really good too. I remember when Guyverson was a racer. Guyverson was a really good racer, but he kept breaking his collarbone, as I recall. And I think he broke his collarbone like 7 times or something like that. And it was some crazy number like that. And he just decided he better give up racing and got into photography and became a really good photographer. Lots of times I've seen where if a guy's a good rider, he can get good at photography pretty fast, because they know what good riding looks like. I've had a number of my test riders who've taken up photography, and they've gotten really good really fast because they know what a good photo looks like. They've got good style themselves. They know what good style looks like.
And you know where to be to shoot the shot on the jump. You know when they're going to peak. You know when they're going to pump through a roller. When I go shoot a photo or go shoot a race, I'm like, I know where I'm going to go stand, and I know what I want to shoot. And I don't want to say it's automatic, but I've got an idea going into it where I'm going to be and when. It's pretty neat. So you're spot on.
Yeah. So the good riders often become really good photographers. The trick is they've got to learn how to work a camera, and then they've got to learn some stuff about composition. They've got to learn the rule of thirds or whatever.
Yep.
They've got to learn about catching the lighting when it looks good, and paying attention to whether the lighting looks good or bad and changing angles. If the lighting doesn't look good from one angle, try a different angle. And that reminds me of a race I shot at a motocross race a few years ago. I forget where it was. It might have been, I think it might have been Midwest or the East or something like that. I was shooting some motocross race, and there was this one part of the track that just looked terrible. And it was just a turn, terrible background and stuff. And just by chance, I happened to walk over to that corner and stand on the other side of the corner. And that was like the best photo on the track. It was like the place that looked terrible in the photos from the inside of the corner. When I went and stood on the outside of that corner, it had this spectacular landscape showing the whole venue with great background and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's funny. this area that I thought was just like a blight on the, on the whole experience, has like the best photo here at the track. And it's like, it reminded me of something that Jody Weisel at MXA gave me one of his rules for shooting photos years ago. He said, when you find a good shot, he said, shoot it from both sides of the track. Shoot it from in front, shoot it from the side, shoot it from the other side. If you've got a good jump, shoot all the different angles of it. So you've got a variety of it, and then move on to something else. Because I used to just try to shoot like the best possible angle of a certain jump. But after hearing that from him, then I started going, well, let me check it out from the other side. I know it's not as good a side, but let me shoot it anyway. At least I don't think it's as good a side. And I'd shoot it anyway. I go, okay, so I got some variety. You don't have to walk as far. You can do it. You can get from the inside and the outside and get good shots,
Right. That's amazing. Well, listen, John, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I think you should probably write a book, a how-to book on how to photograph BMX of all sorts, and share all of the knowledge that you have, because you've got decades of information that you could share. I said the same thing to Scott Town about writing a book about his experiences. So I think you should write one as well.
Oh, well, thanks. Maybe I'll write a book someday. I don't know when. Right now I'm still working for Mountain Bike Action. And so it's possible maybe I'll think about writing a book. It's hard to make, people don't buy books much anymore though. If you write a book, it's pretty hard to actually sell it because people don't buy books. People go online now. So
it's amazing to me, right? It's amazing. Well, yeah, you should do an online school. Look, I'm working for you already. Look at this. You should do an online school for photography.
Well,
I'd sign up.
Thanks. I'll consider it. I can't guarantee anything, but I'll consider it. Thank you. All right,
well, John, for years of your dedication and your talents being shared in the magazine, I want to thank you on behalf of the millions that have enjoyed your work over the years. Thank you, because you doing what you did made me want to be better so I could be in your magazine, which ended up making me better all around. And I appreciate that immensely. You are a big influence on my life. And I'm very grateful for you and very grateful for you coming on the show today. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Craig. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun talking to you.
Absolutely. Let's do this again sometime, and maybe just not on Zoom, but about cameras or something.
Okay, sure. Anytime.
All right, buddy. You have a great day. If you guys like what you're seeing, please make sure you subscribe here on YouTube. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and subscribe there as well. John, you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking to you soon, buddy.
Great. Thanks, Craig. You too. Take care.
All right, buddy. See ya.
See you. Bye.